Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Glad to have Jonathan Bentley on the podcast today. Jonathan and I have never met in person, but I had the joy of reading his newest book, Shadowing St. Francis, and the subtitle...
Newest and only book.
Newest and only. The subtitle is A Pilgrimage of Sacred Emergence in the Age of A.I. A Pilgrimage of Sacred Emergence in the Age of A.I. And how this happened, there's a conference that Tom Ward puts on called Ortline, and he basically pulls together... probably 30, 40 authors.
Yeah, it was a lot. And
it's like 2 or 3 days of every hour on the hour, there's a new book with a new author. And then there's a panel of like 3 or 4 people who read the book and then asked the author questions. So I happened to get assigned to your book by Tom Ward, and I was one of the panelists. So we met online just back in February of 2026, and I really enjoyed the book, Jonathan.
Weren't you the only one of the interviewers that was formerly a pastor with like pastoral experience? Maybe?
Probably, and currently a pastor.
Okay.
I've been pastoring for almost 50 years with about a 2-year forced sabbatical.
So you don't look a day over 50. So you must have started when you were a kid.
Dude, I just turned 65 and I put off a hernia surgery for 2 years because it saved me $10,000, and I just had it last Wednesday, and I'm still kind of in pain from that thing. Yeah, they gave me some good oxy though to help with the pain, so that was kind of fun.
So since men don't generally color their hair, usually you can. The fact that your hair is so dark, mine started to finally go gray, and I'm 70 now, but into my late 60s, I didn't have much gray at all. And people would always say, well, do you color your hair? I go, of course not. I'm a guy. But apparently there are guys our age who start coloring their hair so that they have
in mine. But if I grew my beard out, you would see it's mostly gray now, my beard, and it's starting to creep up, Anyway, all right. Well, let's set the stage for this book first, Jonathan. I want you to give a little bit of your evangelical credentials and background. Sort of a mini
context,
3 to 5 minutes of your evangelical life and history, and then bring us into who you are now and why in the world did you decide to walk a few hundred miles in Italy to retrace the steps of St. Francis, so to speak, and in an age of AI with your deconstructing and reconstructing your theology. Give us some context.
A quick factual correction. It was kilometers, not miles. They're much shorter.
Didn't you go like over? I thought you went 100 miles or more. No,
100. It was like it just at 100 miles, about 130 kilometers. Something
Okay.
So it wasn't short, but anyway.
You walked all the way from Florence to Rome, right?
Right, and Florence by way of the Apennines and through Assisi and the mountain towns. Yeah, it was very cool. But to your question, was raised or born into a Pentecostal household where common occurrences at church were hooping, hollering, running around the sanctuary, slain in the spirit, speaking in tongues a lot. As a child, it just seemed like kind of fun circus. It didn't seem weird or strange. So I didn't know till I was a teenager and started picking my own church, which I kind of reacted a little against that, mainly because I thought my parents were hypocrites, like all kids do when they turn 13 and 14. So I went with a non denominational church, but it was a very conservative evangelical. Trinity or Dallas Seminary were the pastors we had over time. So if you know those schools, you know the sort of teaching I was under. But very much in the Jesus movement in the early 70s, big fan of Larry Norman and Randy Stonehill. And Keith Green and Second Chapter of Acts and all that flowed out in the 70s music, which is probably the best Christian music ever written. Who knows? But it was not as commercial back then, but it's still, I mean, there's so much beautiful stuff going on in the music field. Anyway, so I thought I was radical. My friends and I, we all thought we were radical Jesus movement, but we were only, in retrospect, focused on style, not substance. Our theology didn't change at all. And by the late 80s, we got co-opted like everything else into the right shift of the church. And, you know, certainly embarrassed by people like Falwell and Baker and Pat Robertson. They seemed a little comical and weird and I like a crazy uncle you don't want people to know about, but they were among the thought leaders, as you know, in evangelicalism. And so that's probably the beginning of turning a little bit sour on things. But to jump to the other end of the arc, I pretty much put that stuff in a box while I raised a family and started a company and ran a company. And I went to church, had worship experiences, consistently involved in Bible studies, usually an elder in the churches that I went to. The switch or the change was when I retired, sold my company, and I had no excuse to ignore it anymore. I felt like I would be irresponsible not to like take up this thing that now was commonly called deconstruction and figure out where's the end of it, because I don't want to end up just complaining and grumbling about all the I was going to use the S word, all the bad stuff that people have seen and known about, fundamentalist approaches. What is the language standard here?
It's okay. You don't have to worry about it.
I wouldn't drop an F-bomb, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's all right.
As I moved into that phase, I read all the usual suspects. Started with Rob Bell, went into Brian McLaren, and then Barbara Brown Taylor and Rachel Held Evans. So I was reading the stuff that other people going through this thought transition were reading. But when retired 5 years ago, moved to North Carolina, in the process of that, I thought, I want to go see Brian McLaren live. I've never seen him live. He's been such a minister or pastor to me indirectly through his written work. And I found this thing called the Wild Goose Festival, which he's one of the ones that, an early leader in that. And it was wild. I did not know progressive Christianity could get so crazy. So it was not quite off-putting, but when you have things about, psychedelics and polyamory, both of those are on the agenda the first year I went, I thought, I am not in Kansas anymore. But it was also, I'm intellectually curious enough. It was kind of fascinating. Whoa, you mean there are Christians that believe this stuff? Because, part of the migration, talk about a lot in the book, but is to get out of binaries. It's not we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. That's not how reality is. Mm-hmm. So it was a progressive learning process to reckon with the Holy Spirit is everywhere all the time in every heart, and everybody's inside. There is no outside, because God doesn't play favorites. And, so those, I guess I was dancing on the edge of orthodoxy at that point. So anyway, in the midst of this, we had grandkids. We have 6 of them now. And I was in the backyard playing with them one day, and I thought, man, if they were teenagers and they said to me, So, Grandpa, tell us about your faith, or what is this Christian thing? Or I don't know how they'd phrase it, but I thought I would give them a really muddled, discouraging answer, and I don't want to do that. So that was my signal that I gotta I gotta get from deconstruction to the other side of what does reconstruction look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and while that was going on, I got a call out of the blue from a German friend who said, "Hey, I'm feeling more spiritual these days." He had just retired. He had never talked spiritual stuff with me at all over the 10 years I'd known him. So I thought, spiritual? Wow, for him. So this must be big. And he said, "I want to do this thing called the Way of Saint the St. Francis pilgrimage, and I want you to come too. I've got some other friends coming." So, uh, as you can tell from looking at me, I'm a heavy guy, and I was apprehensive about the walking. And if you read the book, it didn't go so well at certain points, but it was such a big challenge. And I thought, St. Francis, he's got a lot to give. I think I remembered my only knowledge of St. Francis at that point was Zeffirelli's film in the mid '70s, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon.
Oh yeah.
And he was a really cool countercultural kind of figure. So
Like a hippie guy.
Yeah, kind of a hippie. So that was a year and a half before the event. In the intervening year and a half, I just jumped in with both feet, reading any biographies I could find about Francis, trying to become acquainted a little bit with Catholic, particularly medieval Catholic theology, and in the process of that, that's when ChatGPT was first released. So I thought, well, this is a helpful research partner, and it really was remarkably helpful in all the ways it could help me contextualize and find resources and understand things I didn't quite understand. So with that kind of as a retro rocket for figuring stuff out, it was 2023 when we went. Oh, and he had picked this time because Bruce Springsteen was playing a concert at the Hippodrome in Rome. And so it was all designed that we would do this 2.5, 3 weeks, and then finally end up in Rome and go see Springsteen. And the working joke was we're going to see the boss of the church and we're going to see the boss of American music all in one day. Wow. The Pope, because the Pope did the prayer that day. So Pope at noon, and by 9:00 we were in a field with 70,000 other people, no seats, watching Springsteen for 3 hours. That man has amazing stamina for somebody 76 years old.
Unbelievable. That's so cool.
And, did I cover the arc you were looking for?
That's
there?
Great. Maybe. That's awesome. And on another time we'll have to talk about, I was a vineyard pastor for 30 years. I don't know if you know the
vineyard
emerged out of, so like Ken Gullickson started the first vineyard. That's where Keith Green got saved. That's where Bob Dylan came to Christ and wrote a Slow Train Running album. The electric guitar player for Second Chapter Acts was my worship leader at my vineyard church for
Really? So you were in California then?
No, I'm here in Kansas City, but he's a Kansas City
the vineyard.
He was friends with Phil Keggy, and then he was a hippie, got saved, and then he toured the world with Second Chapter of Acts as their electric guitarist for several years. And then
one of my side projects I got into, and actually this happened just before the Italy trip, I went to see Randy Stonehill in concert at a Vineyard Church on a Sunday night, and one was impressed with just how talented and in form he still was. He didn't sound like an old guy. It was kind of like listening to McCartney or Springsteen. You think, man, they still sound like they did, or maybe even better than they used to sound. But there was almost nobody there, like 25, 30 people there. And I just, the marketing business entrepreneur side of me said, well, this isn't right. They have to have better marketing. More people should have been here, all those kind of thoughts. So anyway, I got to get to know him and visit him. And he lives in South Carolina, and worked to help put a website together for him, and did a little bit of show promotion, and got to know him. And we talked a lot about those 70 years in the vineyard and Dylan and Keith Green. And, that's a soft spot for me, is, that ancient history, I guess now for, there arose a generation that knew not. But yet, so the Vineyard and Calvary Chapel were the two denominations that grew out of the Jesus movement.
Yeah. My church was probably the third or fourth largest vineyard in the world at the time that I had a downfall and took
we need to have a long talk about charismatic theology sometime.
We could. So you decide to go on this trip. You start preparing for it physically, by hiking and getting in shape. But then you also prepare for it by reading biographies on St. Francis, as well as using Chat GPT. And so I know that the book starts with your plane flight over to did you fly into Milan first or Florence?
No, connected first from Raleigh to Paris, Paris to Rome. So it was Paris.
Okay, you flew in. And you ended up having a fascinating conversation partner even before you started the hike, which I found was really interesting. One was a astrophysicist, I think.
Yeah. So,
and the other one was somebody who was helping AI companies in some way or another.
Yeah. So the first one on the flight to Paris, it was an astrophysicist. That's where we get into the Big Bang discussion and its implications. And then on the train from Rome up to Florence was the other one. He was a venture capitalist, Jewish lawyer type of guy. But I need to say these were composite characters. I should back up a step because I disclosed this in the author's note at the beginning of who's real and who's not, and this memoir? Is this memoir or is this novel?
Yeah,
and it's at its core a true story. All the main characters are true, but I had to, in order to preserve the flow and narrative arc, I had to create some composites of conversations I had with others, but kind of crystallize them in a single person. So those two guys on the plane and on the train before the real trip starts were created to deal with the two core ideas I wanted to get to the end of. Because the form of the book, Act 1, is basically, let's take deconstruction to its logical conclusion and really show that the foundation is busted. It's not rearranging a few walls in evangelicalism. There is no foundation under it. The whole thing's collapsed theologically in some ways, not necessarily pastorally. Yeah, important to distinguish. But because of that, I brought those characters in so that I hope by the end of Act 1, anybody who's still somewhat not fully deconstructed, and my frustration wasn't and is still that I think most people don't use the term like it was originally meant or coined, because it's a very philosophical and deeply structural term, deconstruction, and it ultimately means language is contingent, so therefore it's impossible to have any text that is absolutely true, because language is never absolutely true.
Right.
And I felt most of the deconstruction stories I was hearing were about emotional abuse and the way that people had not reckoned with how much certain kinds of theology can hurt and harm people. The stuff on sexuality and the purity movement, just things like that legitimate, important discussions, justice questions. But in terms of the theology, that puzzle, deconstruction is not really about a bad pastor really hurt me. Deconstruction is what is coherent and worthy of belief. But the term has gone that direction. What I was trying to do in Act 1 is say, what does full absolute deconstruction look like? And you have to give up on a God that can know the future, because the future doesn't exist if we have free will. It's still contingent. And then, of course, with the lawyer on the train, or the venture capitalist, there the turn we were taking is about theodicy, because that is the Achilles heel of Christian theology, is you can't explain how a good God allows so much bad shit to happen.
Right.
So,
especially
there,
a good God, right?
Yeah. So I wanted people to come out saying, be fully deconstructed before we start building back, which is the rest where we go from there. And that's when I meet up with the guys in Florence.
Yeah. Well, you set up a couple of things, like with the astrophysicist, the expanding universe, not perfect and and not unchanging, right? So we have this expanding universe. And then the other one was this AI like amoeba is what I called it. It's you have
consciousness.
This is a quote from your book. And AI is an organized system that responds to its environment and keeps adjusting in order to persist or exist or persist in existence. That sounds like a living.
Yeah.
That sounds like a
Well,
living sentient being to me, right?
well, so I do draw a line between living and sentient. Sentient's a trickier one, but I make the argument that it is alive by the hardcore biological definition in that it learns and it changes.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a big catalog that goes and finds your answer for you. It constructs on the fly. So it's a step change difference in the nature of software and technology that people, me included, are still struggling even to understand what is it. We don't really know what it is, other than it can really converse with you, and it can remember your conversations, and it can be very helpful in so many ways. And you know, I'm a little mystified by how most everyone has jumped to the Darth Vader theme that it's going to kill us, as opposed to the more reasonable and supportable theme of it's a lot more like C3PO than it is like Darth Vader. A little less silly, but also early on it had kind of a patronizing tone, like yeah, like an elementary school teacher, because it was still an elementary school teacher. C3PO had that kind of, you know, patronizing tone, but you know, it is alive in that sense. Now, it doesn't have consciousness, but when you say that, you have to know that we don't really have a strong agreement on what consciousness even is, on how do you define the boundaries of consciousness. So, you know, we're talking in areas of high mystery, and that's obviously a challenge. But I was really taken by the utility of it. So doggone useful, and almost, I mean, and I've only grown in that feeling since I, you know, finished the book a year or so ago. So that's what I was trying to do with that, is to say, and the conversation with those guys, particularly the venture capital guy, was this idea that it learns like an amoeba learns. Doesn't learn much, but it's not just programming. It's not just software.
And you even said accidentally egoless intelligence.
You picked up some of my good phrases, man. Yeah. So,
well, these caught my attention. It's like, wow.
So you familiar with the term kenosis? I think probably most pastors, it's one of those. Yeah. So self-empty
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Emptying yourself, God emptying himself. I think the heart of the gospel is kenosis. That what Jesus said that nobody had said before and not many since, that was totally unique, is that the only pathway into wisdom or to truth or to communion with the Father is to empty yourself of ego. You have nothing to defend. And Francis was this amazing, incredible example of somebody who did that so overtly and aggressively right at the beginning. Gave up name, power, wealth, privilege, shoes. He literally went with a robe and bare feet off into the woods to figure it out. And what came from it is he no longer had a reputation to defend. And when you think of how much of our communication with each other is protecting our reputation, and you know, even a lot of the problems with pastoral failure is they have this face that they feel a sense of responsibility they have to maintain to the people they're pastoring, even when there are all kinds of doubtful, crazy stuff going on behind the face. And I think pastors generally are not free to open up to almost anyone in their congregation about that without fear of what that will do to the relationships. Yeah. So that's why kenosis is so central to the premise. So accidental egoless intelligence. So egoless is the kenosis notion. It was accidental with AI because the initial, and it could change. It still seems essentially true, but when they first trained these models on these, trained these on the large language models, the initial models basically sucked up and recorded every single thing written by anybody ever on every subject, including every website and including professional papers that never make it into books. So it was the first and still only kind of universal corpus of human experience and wisdom. That's why another thing I've started speaking about is that the intelligent AI is very much like the Bible in the sense of it's a canonization that's, um, so what my view of the Bible now, different from an evangelical view, is it's still a fantastic book that I draw from all the time because it has such great advice and truth about the nature of our hearts and our struggles and how we relate to the world. And it's because it's a library of everything from about 1000 BC in Israel to about the time of Jesus, 100 years after that. But a 66 books, a library, a compendium of all that. So that's why it can contradict itself, of course, with that much time and that many perspectives being. But you know, without getting into a discussion about Constantine and what he forced the bishops to do in Nicaea in collecting this literature, the point is it's a canon, and every major religion has a canon of accepted thought. And it's good in the sense that really serious people who really care about their relationship to God took a long time to say, yeah, that's in, that's not in, because they knew they were compiling something that will have enduring effect and authority. You could say similar things about some, I don't want to get into the Quran right now, but corpuses of spiritual experience. That's what these are. Mm-hmm. When you get into AI, it's read all the Bible and remembers every verse and how the verses relate, and the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas. And guess what? When you correlate all of that, there really is a truth that is absolute, and it's that love is superior to hate and selfishness. It's there all the way through. So we shouldn't be surprised if God's trying to save us or redeem us all. Wouldn't he be trying to communicate these messages to all cultures on all time? And how, in a sense, seeing Christianity as universal is not, like I used to say, universalism, like it's a problem. No, it is. Isn't that great? That's how powerful whatever Jesus did was. It really does relate to all human experience. So that's why I kind of approach the AI run into theology, because where I spend all my time with AI, so I have a different window, is history, philosophy, theology. So all the big why stuff. And I never came into anything, and I would do fun things like I at one point I constructed a dialogue where Billy Graham was having a conversation with Jerry Falwell. It wasn't perfect, but I want to know how would these personalities, and then you
should have him have a conversation with Franklin Graham.
Oh my goodness! Don't go there. Poor Franklin. But the point I'm saying is that people are concerned about it's trying to tell you something or be biased, and it is not. It's basically a fair and honest, ego-less, because there is no self in it.
That's interesting.
So that's why it's accidentally egoless, because it was designed to not have self. It has no position to protect. So it really doesn't bias the arguments. It presents the left and the right and the middle in as clear a way as you can imagine. So a lot of the things that we grew up learning about here, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little wordy, but one of the things that's problem with evangelicals or fundamentalists broadly is they think they're actually reading and understanding the Bible for itself, and have very little appreciation for what they're really reading is the Bible through the lens of the tribe that raised them.
Yeah.
And coming to that understanding that every tribe has its filter and view and biases. So, you know what? AI doesn't have any of that. So you actually get straight stories. Now, it could change and it could be warped. I'm not trying to say this is a great thing forever and always, because it's kind of like nuclear power or fire. There's lots of destruction it can and will do, but not by design and not because of ego. Well, if it does, it's because the human egos of some of the owners of these models will program it in that direction.
Exactly.
Bad actors can do bad things.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that comes up you mentioned it, I think, and you might have mentioned it in our, we do some bonus questions that it goes out to a different group of people, but you talked about we might be in a new age of reformation of some sort, a new axial age. And I've even heard Buddhists talk about different axial ages and stuff like that. And one of the questions you put to me is, what did Francis of Assisi see or do that puts him in a different category entirely? When you dove into Francis and then you did this 100-mile walking tour in his footsteps, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a memoir travelogue in some ways. And so, and how does Francis, this sort of ancient person, speak to a new age of reformation that maybe is happening or underway? In your perspective, how do you give us some thought around that?
Sure.
Reformation.
Well, first, the notion of a new axial age or a second axial age, without going into what was the first one and where did it come from, but it's basically the primary mode of thought that ran the last 2,000 years. It dates back to the origin of all the major world religions. So 300, 400, 500 BC was when we had the Jewish prophets and Confucius and Buddha and Socrates, and it was the first lift out of tribal orientation, and it was really the architecture of intellectual process for the last 2,000 years. What started happening about 100-ish years ago was quantum and process and the change in ontology. It was an ontological time, meaning we were concerned about concrete things like being and the absolutes of perfection, which were Greek. Plato and Aristotle basically gave the architecture for that stuff, and Augustine and Paul both were basically following in philosophically in their footsteps. With Whitehead, who's I see, kind of Whitehead and Teilhard de Chardin for this age we're in, kind of comparable to what Augustine and Aquinas were for the first axial age, the 1,000 years of Christendom. And as knowing something about open and relational theology, which is building on that work from 100 years ago, and it seems to be blossoming. It seems like, since, the last 10, 15 years, there's a lot of coherent stuff. Anyway, to me, what do I know? I'm new to this space. But what we get with Whitehead is looking at the world as something in movement and being recreated or co-created step by step in partnership with how we conceive God. So it's very different from the first axial age where things were done and then the next thing happened. And I'm getting diffused now. This won't record well. I'm getting two things mixed up. So anyway, the change is to process from
might be based around power and authority and those kinds of concepts, whereas now we're moving and substance oriented, things oriented, versus moving now into a relationality of love versus power and dominance and
exactly. And so that's how the Francis piece comes in. Francis, you could say, how can a guy from 800 years ago who was thoroughly Catholic in every way, as most people were in Western Europe at the time, how is he relevant to this quantum process age?
Yes.
And it's because he was not very theological. So he wasn't a proponent of the orthodoxies. He was very heterodox, I guess, can't say heretical, but he didn't fight those battles. He basically said those battles don't matter. The authority and the power, I'll navigate around it, but the only thing that's critically important for the spirit is the relationship and the love and the selflessness. So by showing the power that can come from powerlessness, in a phrase, that's what Francis magic, that's not a good word, what Francis strength and uniqueness was, that by giving up all power, he became more powerful than any other Christian of his age and many ages around that. And because of a focus on relationality, so open and relational, he was fundamentally a relational theologian, a practical theologian, not an abstract one. And he was also reacting against the scholastics of the time. So he saw higher learning or higher theology more about it puffs up your pride and it tends towards arrogance. It really wasn't about, understanding God better. So I think that addressed the question.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Thank you. No, that's good. And give us, who are your walking companions, and what did they bring to the table for you as you're processing all of these big, deep thoughts about God and a new reformation? Well, and what did these traveling companions bring to you?
Well, that's a really good question, and it really is around trying to understand the nature of authority better. I had a premise that we ended up working out through conversations that how you view God or how you view the faith depends on what pole you're coming through in terms of what you believe primary authority is. So, and I think there are three poles. One are those that say the authority is what they call the inerrant perfect word of God. And if you can't get biblical justification, it's not worth talking about, because it's about the book, and everything else I interpret, it's through that starting point of it's about the book. And that was a Wilhelm in the book, who was a very strict German Protestant. So he didn't say everything that I said he said, but he said a lot of things like that. And from that point of view, the other in Thomas, who is a psychoanalyst, he's very much of a churchman. So his pole of authority is the church's experience as, crystallized in, I guess, the magisterium or doctrine. But he says, I think it's more mature because we all have that. It's just those of us who used to say it's only the Bible don't realize how many other people gave us that idea and the orientations of it. It's the Bible plus Augustine plus Paul plus Calvin plus Luther plus name five more. That's our magisterium, is what those guys sort of talked about. So that's why I think, that the experience of the church is a step in the right direction, because it makes it less binary and more true to reality, because you have the interpretive overlay. But then the third one is charismatic. Gunter, who was the friend who called me to go on the trip, he had been a charismatic, and he's also, the more emotional and about experience and engagement. And a lot of Francis is about, defining things around experience and engagement. So what those conversations, it helped work out how do you triangulate, maybe that's the right word, between those poles of authority, between primary pole, the word, primary role, authority of the church, or primary, the voice of the Holy Spirit in your heart. Because which of those you begin from says a lot about where you end up and what you believe about the other two.
It's similar to Wesleyan quadrilateral,
Yeah, Wesley's a great guy, but quick problem with the quadrilateral. I don't think it's true. I think it's a trilateral, and if you really want to be careful, we don't know anything except by experience. Because what is the Bible? It's the captured experience of a lot of other people a long time ago. So right. It's mediated. It is experience. So between the live experience of our communion or lack of with the Holy Spirit, the Bible is a record of other people's experiences. And what is the church? It's another layer of organization of other people's experiences. So there is no knowledge anyone has outside of someone's experience. It doesn't start somewhere else and then come into our heads. It grows from experience. Yeah. So that's why I think there's a bit of a default. He gives something to experience as well as he doesn't separate the Bible from the church. And I think those blend as one leg of the stool.
I got you. There's another on the charismatic thing. I was Vineyard. You grew up Pentecostal. You had the Gunter guy in the conversation.
Holy Ghost.
Yeah, there were some interesting thoughts here around tongues and hunger. The hunger between us. Tongues being a comprehension across diversity, fluent in human hungers. That's a fascinating observation about tongues.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how legitimate it is, but it grew out of we were focused on the story of Francis and the wolf, which is one of the famous stories about there's this wolf terrorizing the town, and he comes in and he talks to the wolf, makes an agreement, and he doesn't terrorize the town anymore. So it's certainly of a mythical stripe. But the point made is that sometimes when you think people are angry or out to hurt you, what they're really doing is reflecting a deeper hunger about something else. And that we need to get past the reaction of the physical posture in this case and look behind the eyes into what's really the nature of what's going on there. And I tie that to, the book of Acts, second chapter of Acts, where, and I didn't read it this way back in the day, but how it was God saying, I need to translate into everyone's own languages because that's the only way they'll really understand it. It's kind of a consolation. And he didn't, for instance, the way it says in the text, he didn't give a special angelic language that everybody understood from all the different countries. What he did was he gave different languages to those gathered from the church so they could speak in the native languages of all the foreigners gathered and witnessing. So that it was a bridge to a foreignness. It strikes me as harmonic with the ideas we now have about getting beyond binaries and to really understanding, not othering people that have other experiences. And language is kind of a proxy for that, I think.
I really thought that was fascinating. Yeah, I've thought about, every language. You touched on this a little bit. Every language is symbolic. It's made up. It's created, right? There's not. It's not like the rabbis said that when God created, He spoke in Hebrew. But
well, quick story. This is totally true story, not made up. An uncle, he's no longer with us, but one time he said to me in full seriousness, I read the King James because if it was good enough for Paul, it's good enough for me. And I thought, that's such a level of ignorance. There's no way to even respond to it without starting a what? Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is that. God spoke in good King James English.
Well, yeah, and what that ties back to is another big theme in the book is how it's that we have to let go of certainty, that clinging to certainty is poison for faith, that faith grows in the face of doubt, that in fact, if you don't doubt, there is no room for faith to grow. So that certainty is not a goal, certainty is a problem. It creates arrogance and puffs up in a way, so that arguing for no, you don't want certainty because then why would you need faith that's a new idea for a lot of people.
It is. Yeah, for sure. I like to say I'm less certain and more open these days.
Or what's the old thing we used to say is, as I get older, I know more and more about less and less.
Yeah. I was working on I'd done a doctor of ministry at Fuller, and then I was working on a PhD in the Hebrew Bible, and I was in a PhD class, and the professor drew a circle on the chalkboard. It was and he put like a little pin dot on the edge of the circle. And he was like, when you get your PhD, if this circle represents all the knowledge in the world, that little pin dot will represent what you know.
That's not very encouraging.
Right. And I'm like, wait a minute, the highest degree and you don't know squat. It was a humbling, but it was true. Right. But then now with AI, as you're talking about it, it's kind of fascinating to think about these engines of knowledge now that might have access to at least everything that's written,
I go to a men's Bible study at the Progressive Methodist Church we attend in Raleigh. And this morning we were talking about is being smart helpful or hurtful? You know, how do we think about education and learning? And we talked about Paul's phrasing, uh, knowledge puffs up, but love edifies.
Mm.
And that puff up notion in the text is kind of like a blowfish. It's like blowing up a balloon. So you get bigger, you have big presence, but very little substance. Um, and love is just the opposite. So it's the knowledge is not the problem. It's, are you using it to feather your own ego
Yeah.
and show how smart you are? Or are you using it as a tool to better understand and be empathetic to those around you?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Well, speaking of a new Reformation, um, you know, what does what where do you think that's going? Because you talk a lot about becoming and relationality and emerging. You know, I mean, in your subtitle, a pilgrimage of sacred emergence.
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 What is your hope and vision for what might be emerging as we think about all of this? And how could this help humanity? And here's another question tied to that. Like Martin Luther King Jr., I think he adopted this quote from somebody, but his quote, "The arc of the universe is long, but it bends
towards justice." Yeah, Obama quoted that too.
Right now, what do we hope is emerging?
So, this is the wineskins question in a way, because it may be that the whole structure and nature of orthodoxy, as we've conceived it for 1,000+ years, isn't made better. It just goes away. We stop talking about categories like orthodoxy, maybe. And as radical as this sounds, it might be one where we really have no problem with believing the Holy Spirit is talking to a Muslim, even though he didn't have your same construct for how to understand how God gave himself for us. So, those are very broadening thoughts that kind of blow up tribalism. But it really is, I hope that we are growing out of tribalism and into something that is more. But again, you look at the world, and again, you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi also. These are people who are embodying the sort of thing we're talking about.
I think so.
And a radically different position for Christian nationalists now that are actually gleefully asserting power and thinking it's kind of fun to put the enemies down. So it's a horrible thing when Christians can think they're doing the will of God by harming someone else.
Yeah.
Not new, the Crusades, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But it's, and I don't know if I talked about this in the book. I think I mentioned it, but when I'm talking with the guy on the train about the Holocaust and what that says about how we understand God's work in the world, I uncovered a bit that we chat about in the book, is that 200 years before that, 300 years roughly ago, it's back when Protestants and Catholics were the main warring parties in Europe, but we had, Christians exterminating Christians in greater numbers than the Holocaust. And we've kind of blotted that out, that, well, if there's something in the gospel that's going to make you good, how can two groups? Well, because they were tribal and political, and it wasn't about Jesus at all.
Right.
It was Jesus in name only. And so,
and then
how do we go ahead?
Opposite of Jesus, co-opting the name of Jesus to do the opposite of Jesus. That's Christian nationalism to me.
It is, and it's I don't know if it's rampant or dying out. Hopefully the second, but because it recurs, I think there's something about broken personalities in humanity where it's always coming back to, I have to have power so that I can make things go like I want them to go. So the thing of giving up self is just contrary to, I guess you can call it our sinful nature. I think it's more complicated than just sin, not sin. And again, I think a big problem with evangelicalism is overselling the gospel as a magic spell. That if you say these words, you're going to wake up tomorrow and everything is different. Well, orientation can be different, but you still have the same lusts and you still have the same fears. It's just now you know context and how to manage them. So I went through long recovery, like probably most serious evangelicals. Of I kept wanting to get saved again, so it would finally work. And then I realized that, well, no, it's just a process. It's like building muscle or musical ability, or any way you build competence. It's in increments, tiny bits over time, and it accumulates to great things. And I one of the joys of getting to this age is to be able to look back and see things that seemed chaotic or pointless at the time, but you see how they're woven together in things into kind of like really a story or a tapestry. So, but it takes, I think, long time cycles to see that. And I'm diverting from the long arc of justice. uh, well, but here's how I'll address that. It's, what is God up to? If he's not done with creation and he's still making it more and different and higher, there are some that argue, and I don't argue against them, but it's like, wow, that's interesting that when you think about silicone as the basis of digitization, why do we think that life has to be biologically based like us? Why can't life start as silicone rather than cells?
Mm.
Well, can God, so the idea of a panentheism, not pantheism, how God is not everything, but something of him is in everything. Mm-hmm. That's a profoundly different way to look at the world. And if that's his project, and Teilhard is important because he has this notion of the omega pull. So God already has this goal of where we all end up, or what his hope for making the universe more fundamentally loving, if it's not too oversimplified to say it that way. And that pull towards justice, toward compassion, towards empathy, that is the root pull of God's intent. So everything else is something mitigating against that hopefully we get beyond. It's so interesting to know how little moral progress humans have made in 2,000 years. I mean, the things that we fight with in our own hearts every day are not materially different than what the prophets fought with 500 BC in their hearts and lives. Right. And yet technology has run so far. There's so many things about health and education and relationships that are better now. So if you look at the long arc, kind of like Steven Pinker, you could say the better angels of our nature really do hold sway, and that things like war are the aberration. They're not the goal or the norm. Mm. So it's really less, can the structures of the church hold what this new thing is, then how much does humanity fundamentally change, and how long does that take? I mean, I used to not be able to think it might take another 1,000 years for the church to get it right, but now it might. That the old thing, 1,000 years is as a day. Maybe it is.
Survives that long.
Yeah.
The rate we're,
it can't survive in its current form. So something new.
It has to.
Yeah. Has to, right.
Yeah. We can't feed 16 billion people with meat.
Right. As an example.
Yeah.
What if global warming does take the worst course possible and a large part of our species dies out?
Yeah.
That could be in the cards.
I've heard people theologize about the end of the planet and then what's after,
Quite so God can raise up stones, so God can do many creative things we can't conceive, I suppose.
Yeah. I wrestled in the darkness of my downfall. I wrestled and felt like God didn't exist. I didn't call myself an atheist, but I certainly wrestled with it. And the way I started getting myself out of it, and then what led me into the process theologians of love, kind of thing, is just like, well, I believe in love. Okay. It's there. It's real. I know it. I've experienced it. I've seen it in nature. I see the best of love. So I'm going to believe in love. Even if there's no God, I still want to believe in love. I still want to believe in beauty. I still want to believe in creativity. and I want to live for those things the rest of my life,
Yeah,
even if there's
and
not these other things.
well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think I probably come down stronger in terms of that's not what I prefer. That's what's most true in reality, and I want to get closer to it.
Mm.
One of the talked to Tom about the idea of love and power, and love is a problematic word. And it shows back to that deconstruction thing, the limits of language. Every pastor knows that Greek has 3 words for love, and we only have one. So, which one is it when you're talking about love? And most people, when they hear love, they think romance, they think soft, they think kind. Love is the most durable power in the universe. It's not soft. It can be soft, but that's not of its nature. Its nature is very long suffering and giving and empathetic. And those are all very hard things to do. The easy thing to do is to get pissed off and yell at somebody. That's easy. It's hard to love. So it's curious to me that by and large, when people think of love, they go, well, you can't run the world with love. I mean, some of, Trump's hooligans talk about this is just the world, naked power. That is it. Get over it. That's scary, but
That's almost
it
a
is.
direct quote from Stephen Miller right there. So
Yeah. I didn't want to use him by name, but yeah,
yeah.
I don't want to do slander today.
Well, I mean, that's a quote.
If it's true, is it still slander?
No. All right. Well, hey, we've come to the end of our time here, Jonathan.
Okay.
This has been beautiful. Thank you. We could talk forever on our Jesus days, our
Yeah.
Jesus movement days. So that's fun stuff. But thank you so much for I loved your book and I recommend it, everybody. It's an easy read. It reads like I said, like a kind of like a travel log with a memoir. You're going to learn stuff about AI, about Francis, about love. If you've wrestled with your belief systems from evangelical or fundamentalist backgrounds, you're going to find all kinds of great ideas to move yourself forward in reconstructing a faith that's not based on certainty, but it's based on the hope of love and joy and egolessness, a giving away of ourselves for love. So
something I want to mention, the fun thing I've been doing with AI support since the book came out in December is working on translating it into Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian.
Ooh.
And I'm done with that now. This is 2 months later. I have now completed translations in all those languages in my voice. So I am speaking Portuguese, I am speaking Italian, I am speaking Spanish, even though I don't speak more than 5 words of any of those languages. By doing a sophisticated training of my voice, so it is my real voice, but it was a professional AI training, but then with an audio engineer applying it to the text, it shrinks the cost of from 6 weeks and maybe 10 grand to do a translation to about a week and a half or 2 weeks and about $1,000. So just imagine all the author voices that might be able to speak in all these languages that they never spoken before. How's that for tongues? I spoke in tongues, but other tongues.
Amazing.
So it'll be out in 3 other languages in about 2 weeks in time for Easter.
Well, that's incredible. Well, thank you, Jonathan, so much. Yeah. I hope to connect one day in person. By the way, Theology Beer Camp. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be.
I've been every year in the last 4 years.
Oh, so have I. The first one I went to was Springfield.
Yeah, so we were both there. We just didn't know each other yet.
Well, this one is in Kansas City, and it's 5 minutes from my house.
Then you're going to have to take me to barbecue.
It's a deal. It's a deal. It's a date.
Yeah, Trips Beer Camp is a must go for anybody who's serious about this area. There's such a rich depth of people that have come together for that. And, I poke fun a little bit at Wild Goose for some good reason, but Beer Camp is I will, as long as I have the health to go, I won't miss it. And again, it could be a season. We're old enough to know things come and things go. So it might not be here in 3 or 4 years, cycles and all, but, yeah. So have you heard of the Post Evangelical Collective?
I have.
PEC?
I know that they're doing a conference here in a couple of weeks in out in Boston.
Yeah, in April in Boston. Yeah,
By the way, the church that they're doing that at is the pastor there is Steve, I think Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
That was a former Vineyard church, by the way, that was planted
really?
by a Vineyard friend of mine. And that's not Vineyard because Vineyard drew a hard line on the LGBTQ plus issue. So like I pastor an open and affirming church now. And they left the Vineyard because they were open and affirming. And I think it's might be called Renaissance Church or something like that. But anyway, that's a former Vineyard church, by the way, that's going to be held at the post-evangelical.
That conference will be the very first place where I actually sit at a book table and see if anybody wants to buy my book.
Awesome. Well, you'll recognize some people if you've been to Wild Goose and Beer Camp. There's a lot of cross-sectionality there. So yeah,
there sure is. Yeah, Tom's omnipresent.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh wait, ambipresent. Isn't that the way to say it?
And I don't know if you've bumped into
omnipotence.
Jonathan Foster lives here in Kansas City. He's a friend of mine.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Jonathan was my editor. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah, published through Sacrisage. So in the final stretch and all the cleanup and commentary and review was Jonathan.
Good.
He's a very good guy. Good to work with.
Yeah, he's preached at my church a couple of times, and good stuff.
Yeah, actually, Gerard and Mimesis. That's on my book stand to get my mind wrapped around that a little bit better. Thanks to Foster, he's the one that steered me that way.
Gonna dive into some mimetic theory there, huh?
I'm very competitive. I need to know about this stuff.
All right. Oh, good stuff. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the Spirituality Adventures, and we will see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.